This could have been the perfect day, but I guess it's just another one that got away like all the rest, and who'd have guessed my own expectations would keep me from any semblance of serenity as I fantasized about what would be, could be, if I were anyone but me. And got things right every now and then. I try my best, but just can't win. But maybe I'm just tired and bummed that what could have been the perfect day is just another one that got away. Today, I want to talk about expectations and how reframing our relationship to having expectations can actually improve our confidence and our ability to communicate and speak publicly as well as in social settings and feeling generally more confident with life. So thank you, first of all, for listening to that poem. If you do not know me, my name is Trisha Veldman. I am a speech and confidence coach and spoken word poet and founder of the platform Powerful and Poised. And it's really my mission to help people feel confident being themselves. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is how, with this influx of technology and the way things are going with AI, I think the most important skill anyone is going to have is going to be our ability to relate and connect to other people. Yet, with so much technology, I've noticed that people's natural social skills and ability to speak with one another and feel comfortable is actually declining because we're so reliant on text-based communication, and it's so convenient to hide behind a screen that we don't necessarily have to learn how to engage socially or publicly. So that's what this channel is really geared towards, is helping people find their confidence being themselves in any situation. And today specifically, I want to talk about expectations because it's something that just really gets me a lot of the time. It's something that I've worked so much on and continue to work on, but I feel like I've come to a place where I'm a lot better at managing my expectations. And I've noticed how that can really impact and has really impacted my overall level of confidence, speaking, presenting, with relationships, with friendships, with anything, just in life. Our level of expectations can directly correlate to our level of happiness and comfort. So the poem that I shared was inspired by a day where obviously I had high hopes for things to go a certain way. And I didn't necessarily have it mapped out specifically. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but in my head, it was just a peaceful, fun, pleasant day, and it ended up being relatively stressful. Plans didn't go the way that they were quote unquote supposed to. And isn't that the big joke? There's the quote that says, when you make plans, God laughs, because often the universe does not cooperate. God doesn't always answer your prayers exactly as you envision them. And it's up to us to work with what we're given and to adjust and pivot when we need to. And this can be so powerful because I know for me, I often face what some people call an expectation hangover, which is where you get so excited for something and you look forward to something, and then the something happens and it doesn't go the way that you expected. And then you're really sad. So I remember when I was little, I was a child, there was an annual field trip at the end of every year of elementary school. Once you reach a certain age, you got to go on a field trip one day to the water park, and then the last day of school was always super fun. And so I remember vividly being in my bed at night, so excited to go to Shipwreck Island Water Park the next day. I was like so giddy and so excited for it. I could barely sleep. And I went and it was fine. But I remember just being a little disappointed that like it was a fun day, but it didn't live up to this expectation that I had. And I've done that with birthdays. I cry almost every year on my birthday. It's gotten better again, but thinking back, especially to my past, I would always get so excited and have all these expectations, and then if it didn't go perfectly, I was always disappointed. And that is not useful. It's not healthy and it's not helpful in any way, because what these overzealous expectations can do is it makes us expect and hope that things go a certain way and we have a certain vision. And then when things don't go that way, we see reality by comparison to this fantasy world, and then we're disappointed. And that's where the expectation hangover comes in, is we brought ourselves to a high and then boop, we're just dropped because we're like, reality literally couldn't live up to our expectations. Or maybe it could have, but because we're looking at it from that lens of this is how it should go, this is how I want it to go, and then it doesn't, it colors everything that actually happens with this like, well, it wasn't what I wanted, therefore it's not good. Whereas if we didn't have the expectation at all, you just go in blind, then you have nothing to compare it to. Or maybe you have it to you can compare it to your past experiences of life, but you're not comparing it to this fantasy that you'd imagined about the day or the situation or the restaurant or whatever it is going. And so instead, it probably feels like it goes better. And I say better because what is better or worse? I don't know. If you have nothing to compare it to, there's no better. It can just be, oh, that was a good day, because you're not waiting for it to be something else. And I think this is pretty self-explanatory. We've all experienced times where we have high expectations, or here's the other component. Sometimes people like to have low expectations so that they are pleasantly surprised. And there is some validity to that. If you don't have high hopes for something, you won't be disappointed. And I think you can use that as a strategic tool by not having high expectations. But I think when you're pessimistic and you have very low expectations, that's not healthy either, because then you're spending a lot of time in the waiting room in this negative state, versus keeping yourself in a neutral state and then having the event actually happen and then not being overwhelmed or underwhelmed by what actually happens. It just happens. And I see the low expectation piece a lot when it comes to building confidence. So when I'm working with clients, particularly speech coaching clients, and they're getting ready for some presentation, they like to think they're going to do a bad job, because then if they do a good job, they'll be pleasantly surprised. And again, used strategically, it can work, but there's a lot of danger in that, because sometimes that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then they're spending the whole week or 2 weeks or month leading up to the presentation dreading it and just in this terribly negative state. And they'll say, well, I don't want to get my hopes up and then be disappointed if I do worse. And that's the big fear, is we know that over expectations can make us disappointed. And so sometimes we go the opposite direction and we say, well, I'm just going to assume this is going to be awful, and then it'll be fine by comparison to my really low expectations. And sometimes, something I do not recommend at all, people will say at the beginning of their speech, or even just in a conversation, they'll tell someone like, oh gosh, I'm not really prepared, or I'm super nervous, I don't know how this is gonna go. And sometimes that's charming, but a lot of times it's just setting a low expectation by others, which again, we do so that they'll think, oh, they're not as bad as they said they were. They'll be pleasantly surprised. But every time someone does that, or every time I've done it, if I was at an open mic last week and I gave a little disclaimer about my poem, I was like, this is a silly poem, it's not my best, da 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 da. And people came up to me after like, you didn't need to say that. Like, it was good. You didn't have to do that. And it just shows our own insecurity when we do that. Again, sometimes it can be charming, it can be endearing to tell someone like, hey, I'm really nervous right now. But a lot of the time, that's just going to take us down a notch in their mind, especially if you're trying to persuade someone or you want to come across as very knowledgeable or confident with your material. So in professional context, starting a presentation with, I'm super nervous, don't do this very often, it's not a good idea, because then they're going to automatically hold you to a lower standard in their mind. And then maybe they'll be impressed with what you say, but that's still going to be there as like, well, they're really good, but they don't believe in themselves. Versus you don't have the low expectation, or you don't verbalize the low expectation and you just go in and you do it. They don't have anything to compare it to. They can still be pleasantly surprised without having it in their mind that you think you're awful. So you want to be careful. We all want to be careful with overly high or overly low expectations. Overly high will keep us in a really positive, good state, but then risk of like plummeting if things don't go exactly how we imagine, which they rarely do. Overly low expectations can give us that little boost when things go well, but then it means spending all that time beforehand in a negative state. And why would you do that? Because whenever that happens, we always say like, oh, I guess I didn't need to worry so much. Yeah, so why worry so much? And the solution, of course, is something that's talked about all the time in many spiritual practices, particularly in Buddhism, which is the concept of non-attachment. And I sometimes struggle with this because I think like, well, if I'm totally unattached, I'll become ambivalent. And I like having emotions. I like having big emotions. And fortunately for me, I have poetry as an outlet to channel those big emotions. And I have since learned that non-attachment doesn't have to mean devoid of emotion, which means we can still be happy for something. We can still be excited that something is going to happen without indulging in the fantasy of how it should go. So it's saying, oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to that event on Friday. And then just letting yourself be happy about it without feeding the story that says how it should go. So basically, the remedy that I found is to not think about it so much. So when I think back to when I really transformed my own relationship to speaking, because I used to be so awkward and uncomfortable and socially anxious, and then there reached a point where I was like, oh wow, that came out better than I thought because I hadn't thought about it. And so when I would, for example, go have a conversation or go to a party that I wasn't planning to go to and I wasn't thinking anything of it, I tended to socialize a lot easier because I didn't have any hopes and I didn't have any worries about it either. So many times people find, and comment if this is true for you, that when you're thrown off guard and you're just thrust into a situation, you don't have time to be nervous. And therefore, we often do a lot better. My clients tell me all the time, like, yesterday I had to give this presentation and my boss gave me no warning and I went into it and like, it was fine. It was okay. I wasn't nervous. So we still want to prepare for things when we can. And think of a time in your life where you weren't necessarily expecting anything and something spontaneous happened and it was a really pleasant experience because you didn't have time to get overly excited about it and be disappointed, and you didn't have time to worry or get nervous about it. So then we think, well, it would be a perfect world if like, oh, this thing just comes my way and I just go with it. Yay. Oh, and this other thing comes my way and I just go with it and I don't have to plan and I don't have to think and I don't have to worry and I don't have to overindulge in my fantasy. That's obviously not always going to be the case. So what I found as the remedy is give yourself permission to look forward to it. Or if you're nervous, give yourself permission to say like, okay, what can I do to prepare as best I can without feeding the story of all the ways that it might go wrong? Just prepare. But then distract yourself. Think about something else. Because if you're thinking about it one way or another, you're creating expectations. If you're thinking about it to prepare, that is one thing. But if you're thinking about it as either a story of what might happen for the good or a story of what might happen for the bad, that's where we get in our own way because then we craft this situation in our mind, and then inevitably we're going to compare what actually happens to that situation, when instead, if we just stop thinking about it and think about something else, then we go into the situation with so much more ease. So to give a practical example, I perform regularly at open mics, and I often do poetry or speaking engagements. And I used to, even before I did open mics, especially back in the day when I was really nervous about speaking, I used to, in the moments leading up to whatever it is I was about to do, I would get so nervous. And I would be just like, I would feel my heart beating, my heart would race, it, especially if they'd like read a bio or something, like Trisha Feldman is da-da-da. I would be like, oh, freaking out the moments leading up to it or the whole event. So even when I first started performing at open mics, even though at that point I felt pretty confident public speaking, I still would get super nervous, especially when I knew my turn was coming up. And I would be like in my head of like, okay, calm myself down, use all your strategies, da 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 da. And strategies help. I teach how to calm down in the moment. But the thing I found to be more helpful than breathing or giving yourself a pep talk or anything else is don't think about it. So now, when I'm in the audience at open mic, when I know my turn's coming up, I make an extra effort to really listen to the person before me. Because what I used to do was sit there and replay my poem in my head over and over while other people were talking. I would ignore them and just replay my poem to make sure I didn't forget it. But all that did was make me more nervous about my upcoming performance. Now, I will make sure whoever is speaking before me, I am just zeroed in on what they're saying, because it doesn't give me room to think about myself. And when I'm not thinking about myself, I'm not nervous. And then they call my name and like, boom, then I just do it. And I may still get some jitters in the very beginning, but it's not like I'm going up to the microphone already shaking, which is what used to happen. And the same, I think, is true for events and situations we have in life. So it's not to say don't think about it at all. Think about it to the extent that you need to prepare. For example, make the plans. If it's your wedding day, coordinate the things. If you're going on a fun date, pick out your outfit and like look at the menu so you can decide what you want to eat in advance if you're like me and get stressed out by menus on the spot. But do whatever you need to do to prepare. If it's a presentation you're not looking forward to, prepare as best you can, practice it. But when it comes to actually visualizing how it's going to go, I recommend putting your attention elsewhere. But then after you've prepared and practiced, don't think about it. Think about something else. Distract yourself. Let yourself focus on something else so that when the moment arrives, trust that you are prepared and enjoy it without having the noise of the woulda, coulda, shouldas in your head. So I want to share two more thoughts about visualization, because you might be listening to this and say, well, I've heard a lot of people say you should actually visualize exactly how you want things to go. And that is a technique that people use in manifestation and law of attraction to bring things towards them. And I think that's fine as long as you stay unattached to the outcome. Meaning, you visualize it, you see it going exactly how you ideally, in an ideal world, it would go. But then you say, this or something better is on the way, and you have to let go. And every manifestation teacher will tell you that you cannot be too attached, because then what happens? The expectation hangover. So if you want to sit down in meditation and do a visualization, that's fine. But then after you meditate, let it go. Don't think about it anymore. When you're in the moment, don't worry about it going exactly how it was supposed to go. And then if it doesn't go the way that you'd visualize, which it rarely will go exactly how you visualized, you just feel grateful for how it did go without saying like, oh my gosh, but I visualized and it didn't go that way. Well, you're not God and it's okay, and life is going to happen, but it's the relationship you have to that makes all the difference. So it's staying, again, unattached by saying, yes, I'm excited and I'm letting it go. I'm not attached or fixated on this happening exactly that way. And the other way visualization can be very powerful is, I've heard from David Guillaume, who teaches modern Kabbalah. He recommends actually visualizing the worst case scenario. And my boss used to talk about this too. He would say, like, walk yourself through the worst case scenario. And so, from a spiritual perspective, well, psychological and spiritual perspective, what it does is it prepares you for, okay, let's say I totally bomb on stage and it's just absolutely horrible. And you walk yourself through that, you feel all the negative feelings, and then you let it go. You stay unattached. You say, you know what, even if that happens, I can handle it. And things will be fine. And I'll still have my home and my family and my health and like all the other things, you know? So it's a way to prepare yourself in case that does happen. But you're not visualizing the worst case scenario, hoping that that'll happen or expecting that to happen. But it's kind of a buffer to say, well, even if this happens, I'll still be okay. And one interesting thing that happened to me when I gave a TEDx talk, one of the speaker coaches walked us through a visualization strategy where we envision ourselves giving the talk. And when I did the visualization and everything went perfectly in my visualization, when I did it a few days before the event, it felt amazing. I was like, oh yeah, I got this. But then it was the day of the event. And like 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes before I went on stage, she walked us through this visualization and it started making me nervous because then I was too close to the moment and it got me in my head and it got me thinking. So I actually stopped. I just ignored her. I tuned her out while she was doing the visualization because I was like, this is making me physically nervous because the stage was right there and like I was about to walk on stage. So do these practices in advance, but on the day of, distract yourself. Think about like what I did before my TEDx is I was like chatting with people and I was talking about other things and like commenting on people's clothes, and I made sure to be like in a really good mood. So when I walked on stage, yeah, I did feel some jitters, but they went away, and it wasn't like the kind of jitters that would get in my throat like in the past, where if I had sat there dwelling on everything that could possibly happen, it would have been a totally different experience. So all of this is to say, I encourage you to let yourself feel emotions, whether they're happy or excited and you're looking forward to something, or you're nervous about something, or you're dreading something, or you're sad that something's going to happen. Let yourself feel the emotions. Do what you can to prepare, but then let it go. And if you do have a vision for how things are going to go in your plan, try to stay unattached to it. Let it happen the way it's going to happen. And then once it happens, get over it. One thing I'm constantly working on is the replaying. I'm like, I should have done this and I could have done that. And da, 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 da. I think that is like one of my biggest issues that I'm still working through, but getting better every day, is just recognizing this is how it happened, and that's good. There's good in that, even if you don't understand it. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment if you got any value from today's video. Like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to my email newsletter if you want more content like this, or poems and speech-related content as well. And check out this next video, which is all about the logic of optimism. Thank you.